poem comprises of 16 5-line stanzas. That means the entire poem comprises of 80 lines. So the poem is quite lengthy. It was written by Sylvia Plath in the year 1963, shortly before her suicide. It is majorly about the Plath's deceased father, Otto Plath, whose oppressive presence in her life is well depicted in the poem. And also, the poem is about the poet's perplexed relationship with her father and being trapped by the feelings of him, even though he was long dead before. So, it's about the complexity between the relationship which the poet shared with her very dominating father, as it is conveyed in the poem. When we'll look into the explanations, we'll understand. Then it is the poem was very critically acclaimed when it was published, and now also it is one of the most discussed poems written by Sylvia Plath, and it has also gathered a lot of feminist praise because of its subject and its discussion on the patriarchal, figures and the Electra complex and such elements in the poem. For many people, the poem can be a very difficult read as it has tremendously violent imagery and it has invoked the Jewish sufferings, and its tone is very vitriolic. So because of that, it can be a really hard read for many people. And one of the major and very significant elements of the poem is the Electra complex, which is seen in the personality of the poet Sylvia Plath. And what is Electra complex? As proposed by psychoanalyst Carl Jung in his theory of psychoanalysis, Electra complex is a girl's psychosexual competition with her mother for the possession of her father, of which a boy's analogous experience is the Oedipus complex. So these two terms are quite popular and quite discussed and were quite controversial when they were, brought into the scene or the discussion in the literary world, and the psychology world. But in this poem, we can see the traces of Electra complex being discussed. Secondly, the poem has a lot of metaphors being used. The poet has used a lot of metaphors for her own father, like Nazi, a vampire, and even a bastard at the end, which is quite shocking to read. But why she has given her so many negative metaphors? She has compared her father with such negative figures or elements because she had a very troubled experience. So in spite of the title of the poem, which is Daddy, which is quite a sweet word or a depiction of a sweet relationship which many of the daughters share with their fathers, the content of the poem somehow exposes the complex and the perplexed relationship which is shared between the poet and the father and her father. Another element of this poem is, in a very hidden way, the poet has also exposed how troubled her relationship was with her husband, Ted Hughes, who was also a poet, because he left her for another woman after 7 years of marriage. But what happens in Electra complex, a girl usually tends to seek or find a man who is quite similar in personality to her own father. So this happened with the poet also, and she later on, after the death of her father, ends up craving to loving, or she ends up falling in love and marrying a man who was a kind of model for her father, who was exactly similar to her father in personality. But later on, she also found a lot of trouble to maintain the relationship with her husband, and that is one of the aspects which is highlighted in the poem. So the entire poem is about how the poet struggles not only during the time when her father was alive. She struggled a lot with her relationship with her father, but after his death also she struggles a lot, because somewhere she realized, or she used to feel, that she was captivated by the emotions, the complex and disturbing emotions which she had towards her father, because sometimes she used to feel that she was deeply in love with her father, but on the other hand, sometimes she felt that her father had dominated her a lot. So that's all about the introduction of the poem, and now we'll be dealing with the line by line, stanza by stanza explanation of the poem. I'll explain. I'll read out the lines and then I'll explain. All right. You do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe a rash. So here the poet is saying she is using second person for her daddy, you. All right, and she's calling him as you. You do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot. Means she wants to say that she is no longer she's going to put up with the black shoe she's lived in. So here she is referring to her father as a black shoe, and she lived with her father in a black shoe, and she was poor and scared for 30 years. So in order to, as I have already shared with you, that she committed suicide when she was 30, and this poem was written exactly before she committed suicide, means sometime before she committed suicide. So by that time she was 30 years, and she is saying, for 30 years, because of you and your memories, I have suffered a lot, and I felt so suffocated, and I am not going to continue like this anymore, and I'm going to put an end to all these things. That's what she wants to say. And for your information, I would like to tell that her father was died when she was 18 or 19 years old. So even after her father's death, her memories lived with his memories lived with her, and she continued feeling suffocated because of this. Now here I have, as I've told, that she has used a number of numerous metaphors to denote her father. So here she has used the metaphor of black shoe to denote her father. Now the second stanza, before starting that, I would also like to expand that for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or issue. She saying that because of his presence and because of living with him, she was barely able to breathe. And even, issue is the gesture to sneeze. So she was not able to do even that, because she felt so suffocated with his father, with her father. Sorry. Now stanza 2. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one grey tooth, big as a Frisco sail. Now here she is saying that, Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. So she is saying that the father, that she has had to kill him, and if she is already murdered, and she has already murdered him. And but then in line 7, the speaker says that he died before she had time, though she doesn't make it 100% clear as if she means to say before I had time to kill him. It could mean something like before I had time to get to know him, or before I could make him proud. So either way, it's shocking that our speaker claims she had to kill her father. After hearing this violent sentiment, we are not sure if she is sad that he died, or she's angry, or what. Now the marble heavy, a bag full of God. These are again the metaphors she has used to describe her father. The marble heavy can be used as the stiff heaviness of a corpse, or even a marble gravestone. Both can be the things. And a bag full of God means so far the poet's father has tried to control. He was very dominating person in her life, and he tried to control her. So he was like a god for her, who tried to control her all through. And a bag full of God. So it could be, the bag could either be the skin around her bodies, or can be a bag. All right. So the image of her father as a bag full of God shows her conflicted feelings about him. Maybe her father died when he was young and he controlled her world, or a sort of God over her life. Okay. And perhaps his death caused memories of him to have more control over the speaker's life. Even when he's dead, he is somehow indirectly controlling her because of his memories. She is being driven. So she is considering him or calling or denoting him as a powerful god. Okay. Now the stanza 3. And ahead in the freakish Atlantic, when it pours beam green over blue, in the waters of beautiful Nauset, I used to play to recover you, ash dew. Now to remind you, for your information, I would, you can see that there are many German words which are being used in the poem. His father was a German, as I've described you before. He was a German immigrant who came to America. And because she has written this poem thinking about her daddy, father, so she has used many German words. Ash2 is one of those German words. Now she's saying in stanza 3 that the speaker describes that his father as a statue. She has described in the previous stanza. But then she says that how the statue is homogeneous. One of its great toes is as big as Frisco. Frisco is what? Frisco is San Francisco, the city of California in United States. And the seal here is the sea bird or the sea animal, sorry. And its head is as all across the United States and the Atlantic. So the speaker describes Atlantic as freakish, but it sounds pretty, pouring its water green as a vein over the blue of the ocean. So the speaker even comes right out and says that Nauset word is used. It's a region, actually it's a region in the shore of Massachusetts in US. It's beautiful. These lines shows us that the statue stretches. So many things, so many places she has described, which shows that the statue, her father's statue is like a statue. He is like a statue, stretches from coast to coast of the United States. So he's stretching all over from United States with a toe in the Pacific and a head in the Atlantic. But remember that the statue is actually the image of the speaker's dead father in her head. Then she is saying, I used to pray to recover you. Ash2. What does that mean? Here you have to concentrate on the word I used to. So now she doesn't pray anymore for her father to come back or to recover, but previously she used to pray to recover you. Recover you means daddy. She's speaking to her daddy. Okay? She's speaking about her daddy in second narration, second person. So she's saying, there was a time when I used to pray to recover you, which can be to regain you or to get healthy again, for you to get healthy again. Who asked you? That is, it's you. Asked you means oh you in German. Then in stanza 4, in the German tongue, in the Polish town, scrap flat by the roller of wars and wars, but the name of the town is common. My polite friend, 2 stanzas we study together, says, there are a dozen or two, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you, the tongue stuck in my jaw. Now here, the poet is saying that in German tongue, that is in German language, in the Polish town, scrap flight by the roller. So she is saying that the speaker is talking about the German tongue or the language, but in a Polish town that has been destroyed by the war. And but the speaker doesn't say something like that, destroyed by war. She says it has been scrapped flat by the roller of the wars. So the roller of the wars are denoted as bulldozers, and also of rolling out cookie dough until it's flat. So then she repeats the word wars 3 times, giving us the idea that this place has been flattened by more than one war, because 3 times war are used. So this place is flattened like by a bulldozer. And which are these bulldozers? Are actually wars which has happened on this land more than once. But the name of the town is common, my Polak friend says. So there is a continuation from 4th stanza to 5th stanza, where she's saying, my Polak friend says there are 1,000 or there are a dozen or two, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. So she's saying that you come from a town. As we know, her father is a German immigrant, but you come from a town of Germany, but Which town? We doesn't know. We cannot say. Why so? Because my Polak friend means my Polish friend says the town's name is quite common. So she is saying the town from which her daddy is coming, its name is quite common. There are multiple towns with the same name. So it is difficult to tell that from where you come, where you put your foot means where you put your foot, and your root means from where he belongs to. And then I never could talk to you, the tongue stuck in my jaw. And then she's again saying, describing the evil nature, the dominating nature of her father, saying that I could never talk to you. I don't know from where you come to, because the place from where you come has multiple, Germany has multiple towns with the same name, so it's difficult to tell from which town you come from of that name. But I could never talk to you also because I was so scared of you. That's what she means here. That's what can be perceived from the tone of the poem so far. And she's very scared of her father, and I could not talk to you, she's saying. So I could not talk because my tongue was stuck in my jaw, because I was so scared to talk to you, and I was never able to speak to you. Not only because of this fear, but also because of her unknowingness of the German language. All right, the language of the country from where his father, to which his father belongs to, right? So next, I think we have covered stanza till 5th. From 6th stanza, I'll be explaining. Now in the last stanza we have seen that how she was telling about her father's origin, that she's not sure because of the name of the town from from which he belongs to has is quite common, and there are more towns in the Germany with the same names, and she cannot speak because she is apprehensive to talk in Germany because she doesn't know Germany. Either that can be one of the reasons, or she is very scared of her father. All right, as we can see in the poem. Now, starting the going into the next stanza, that is stanza 6. I never could talk to you, the tongue stuck in my jaw. That's how we ended. And it stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ish, ish, ish. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. What does this mean? Now, the speaker says she laments that she could never talk to her father because her tongue was always stuck. Why? Even worse, the area where her tongue got stuck was like a barbed wire snare. Now, barbed wire is pretty nasty stuff and would rip a tongue to shreds. So, she felt as if her tongue got stuck in a barbed wire snare. The speaker demonstrates her tongue getting stuck in German, repeating ish. Now, the German is again a German word. Ish is again a German word for I. So she demonstrates her tongue getting stuck in German while speaking, and she is speaking ish, ish, ish. Her tongue seems to get stuck so badly that she can only stammer I, nothing more than that, because she's stuck with the language. Why did her tongue get stuck? We are not sure, as I told you, right? Maybe her father made her nervous or scared. That can be one of the perceptions we have as a reader. Maybe she's not very good at speaking German. So any of these two things can be the reason why her tongue is stuck. But her tongue is stuck while speaking German language. She then repeats that she could hardly speak, but the context of this line seems to be more general. Earlier she said she could hardly talk to her father, but now she can hardly speak at all. Okay. Before she was saying that she could hardly speak to her father, but now she is completely, I could hardly speak. She cannot speak only, not even with her father, but overall she cannot speak. Now the next lines. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. And why so? So our tongue-tied speaker is telling us that she thought every German was her father. She could see her father in every German. Why? Because her father belonged to Germany, and the Germans were the people who executed and forced the genocide of the innocent Jews.
And because of this incident and because of the cruelty of her father, she's actually comparing father with those Germans. And she is saying that I could see you in every German, and that she found his language dirty and offensive. Maybe her tongue not only got stuck when speaking German. Perhaps she got nervous speaking the language of her father to other Germans who all seemed like her father. So these lines show us that the speaker is deeply disturbed by the memories of her father. So the complexity, the struggle of the relationship with her father can be seen here. She sees him in every German person she comes across, and the association is unfortunately a negative one. So here you can, in this poem so far, you can see that she is in love also. She wants to overcome her memory also, but she is have a negative attitude towards her father also. Now coming to next stanza, an engine. Now this is a continuation of the previous lines. Okay, I could hardly speak that language, and then and the language obscene. Now if the last line of the previous stanza, if you will see, there is no period or the full stop after the last line. I thought every German was you. There is a full stop, and then the line comes, and all language obscene. There is no period or full stop, and then there is a continuation in the next stanza. An engine shoving me off like a Jew. So she, in this stanza also, she's talking about the German language. There's a continuation, okay? And what is the continuation? What is the language? What is the metaphor used for that language? The word engine. The word engine is used to denote language, or it is the metaphor. And how it is the metaphor, we'll see. An engine shoving me off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. So, we can see the engine is probably a metaphor for the German language. Then the speaker takes the engine metaphor further, saying that the language, like a train, is shoving her off like a Jew. Like the language is shoving her, and shoving means carrying. You know, all the Jews were carried in a train to those Holocaust, to those gas chambers. Similarly, the language is carrying her. So she is comparing her own situation with those of the situation of the victims, Jew victims who were carried to the gas chambers. And here the train is compared. The train which was carrying the Jew is compared to the engine, The engine is compared to the language, because the language is also very torturous to the poet. So here shuffling is an example of onomatopoeia. It uses words to mimic the sound of a train. So the significance of being taken by train like a Jew is that during the Holocaust, the Germans took Jews to concentration camps by way of train. The speaker even lists some World War II concentration camps like Dachau, Auschwitz and Belsen. And she says that she is being taken to these places. Dachau, Belsen were in Germany, and Auschwitz was in German-occupied Poland. So speaker is terrified by the German language, and it feels like it is a train taking her to a horrible mass death. So this language is like a train which is taking her to a horrible mass death. So she's comparing her situation with that of, and she has brought in a lot of elements of, Nazi rule, Holocaust, gas chambers, Jews, the genocide of Jews, and this was the reason, the poem garnered a lot of critical attention from all across the globe. Now the next lines, I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. She's saying that she started speaking like a Jew. Why? Because she was so opposed to the German language. They were opposites, right? Germans and Jews. So she was so opposed to the German language that she begins to talk like a Jew. Perhaps in Yiddish. Yiddish is the language for Jews. She even thinks that she may be Jewish. So these lines explain that the speaker associates the fear and terror of her father with the struggle of the Jewish people against the Germans. It's a vivid and disturbing metaphor. Now stanza 8. Now this is again a little bit complex that you will have to understand. The snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna are not very pure or true. Now these are the places surrounding Austria border. Okay, Tyrol is a part of Alpine mountain region surrounding Austrian border. And the clear beer of Vienna is also not very pure. It's a kind of beer from Vienna which can also be found in Europe. So it is not specifically from Vienna. So these two places, the poet is, in a sarcastic way, she's saying the snows of Tyrol, because it is surrounding by Austrian border and Italian border, so it's not pure. Two countries are mixed. Okay, that region geographically. Okay, so she's saying these are not very pure and true. With my gypsy ancestors and my weird luck and my tarot pack and my tarot pie, I'm a bit Jew. And she herself is denoting that I am also not very pure. Why? Because she is gypsy. She has a gypsy ancestress. Means one of the ladies in her family was a gypsy. So gypsies are what? They are not pure. They don't stick to one place. They keep on roaming from one place to another. And on the contrary, if you will say, Germans were like very proud of their nationality, that we are Germans and we are pure. Why this all things happened against Jews? The genocide happens against Jews because they thought that Jews are not superior race because they are impure. They are not pure and they doesn't belong to Germany. So that was the idea. So the entire war and the entire atrocity was all because of the concept of purity and the concept of not being pure. So she is sarcastically telling the snows of Tyrol were also not pure. The clear beer of Vienna are not very pure or true. I am also not very pure or true. So she can actually, compare her with these things which are not pure. She's telling, because I have a gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my tarot pack and the tarot pack is like the reading of the fortune. So I may, by that luck also, I am not pure because I am a progeny of one of the gypsies, right? So I'm a bit of a Jew. So she can, she feels in sync with the Jewish community rather than the Germans. And she's seeing Germans as the enemy. And who is a German in her life? His father. So again, a negative element. Now the next stanza, coming to the stanza 9. I have always been scared of you with your Luftwaffe, your gobbledygook, and your neat mustache and your Aryan eye bright blue. Panzer man, oh you. Now she is saying now these lines are again spoken about her father. She's saying that I have always been scared of you. Throughout my life, I was very scared of you with your Luftwaffe. Now Luftwaffe means it is again a German word which denotes for Air Force and is specifically used to refer to the German Air Force of World War II. Alright, so Germany played a very crucial role in World War II. Atrocious role, right? So she is saying I was very scared of you with your Luftwaffe. Means why? Because of your this Air Force attire and because you belong to German Air Force, because you were in Air Force kind of. She used that word to tell that I was scared of my father because you somehow looks like that. German Air Force looks like you belong to those because you are a Germany and you have the similar traits of atrociousness, of dominance. All right, and your gobbledygook. Now here this word gobbledygook doesn't have any meaning. It's nonsense. But just we use but it is significant. Why? Because it probably refers to the strangeness of the German language to an English speaking leisure. Like we say for Chinese language, we say chin chan, something like that. Okay, so similarly she has used this term for the German language. It's a nonsense word without any meaning, but she has used that denoting that you have with your Luftwaffe and your gobbledygook means your German language. And then she says, and your neat and mustache and your Aryan eye bright blue. So neat mustache here is the reference of Hitler she made. Now she compares her father with that of Hitler. So this has again, now this is in a hidden way, because Hitler was known for her very neat mustache and he was German and Nazi and her father is also a German. So because of the similar traits of dominance, fascism, he was a fascist ruler who used to dominate and suppress, who believed in dominating and suppressing others. So she is comparing her father with that of Hitler, and your Aryan eye bright blue. So I am all scared of your Luftwaffe, your neat mustache, your Aryan eye and bright blue. So that was one of the major reasons, one of the statements, major significant statements which Hitler and the Nazis believed, that we are Aryans, we have blue eyes, we have superior features, fair color, and that's why they thought they are superior to Jews, and they religiously executed Jews. That was the reason, right? And then she says Panzerman, or you. Panzerman refers to German tank drivers and continues the image of Speaker's father as scary and terrible. Now these tankmans, if you'll see those heavy tanks, what kind of image you will have? Nowadays, if we'll see, we'll think of Syria or Yemen or Egypt, because these kind of images invokes a sense of fear in us, a sense of war in us. Okay, we are reminded of war and atrocity and blood and damage. So she says Panzerman, that is German tank drivers. She's scared of all this. Oh, you. Now this time she has used previously in line 15 she has used the same term as du. So in this line she has used OU in English, she is saying. Alright. So this was the explanation till stanza 9. Now I'll be explaining stanza 10. Now the line says, not God but a swastika, so black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. Now these are very beautiful lines, I would say, of the poem. Now she's saying not God but a swastika, so black no sky could sweep through. So now again she's talking about her father. Speaker has turned to her sign of OU from earlier in the poem, and she also returns to the concept that father seemed like a god to her. So initially she said God, like a bag of full of God, something like that. Now she is saying not God but a swastika. Now she is changing the metaphor she initially used for her father, and she is saying now he appears her to be a swastika and not God. And what is the swastika? Swastika is the symbol. It was a symbol used by the Nazis. So the Nazi symbol that has come to be associated with the evil. So, but he's no normal swastika. He's so black that he blocks the sky. Why black? Black is the color here used for evil. He's so black, no sky could speak through. Means no sky could look through. He's so black. So he is compared, her father, the daddy, is compared with swastika here, and that too with no sky. So that is, he's so black and widespread over the sky that the sky has become hidden. And when he has a swastika, he is rather very extreme. So she has compared her father also with a statue which was stretching all across the US. Now she's comparing him with a swastika which is stretching all over the sky. Now in lines 40 to 50, every woman adores a fascist. Very important lines. Every woman adores a fascist. The boot in the face, the brute, the heart of a brute like you. Means what? The speaker here says that every woman loves fascist man. Now, who are fascists? Fascism is an extreme authoritarian type of government that we associate with cruel dictators. Hitler and the Nazis were fascist, very authoritarian. Okay. She then goes on to describe what women love about fascist men. The man's boot in the woman's face. When it is said the boot in the face, the boot is actually on the woman's face. The brute means the brutal, a rather cruel gesture to establish dominance and power. Brute heart of a brute like you. It's not hard to imagine someone like Hitler stomping on someone's face. So she is explaining and comparing her father with that of Hitler. He's saying that he's a fascist, keeps the food, a kind of fascist who keeps the food in the face of a woman. And she connects the boot in the face with brute hearts of brute men like her father. This use of internal rhyme and repetition really intensifies the accusation that her father was a cruel fascist. And why the women they adore the fascist? I don't know if you have heard about a term known as Stockholm Syndrome. Although I am not pretty sure whether the poet has used the term Stockholm Syndrome, but there are certain women who likes to be dominated. In Stockholm Syndrome, what happens? The woman, falls in love. It can be either with women or men. The victim falls in love with the perpetrator. Suppose what happens in many cases of domestic violence and all, sometimes what happens, the woman who is a sufferer, instead of suffering so much, instead of being dominated, she likes to get dominated, and she repeatedly falls in love with the perpetrator. She's confused that the person who is actually dominating is actually loving her or not. So like what happened when the movie came out, the Kabir Singh. So many people and many feminists, actually contradicted and criticized the movie, saying that the male character was so dominating, and but the girl was in love with the boy. So that kind of tendency is known as Stockholm Syndrome. Even when the kidnap, sometimes what happens, there are many movies where we can see a guy kidnaps a girl, and the girl falls in love with the kidnapper also. So that tendency of falling in love with the perpetrator or the dominating one is known as Stockholm Syndrome, and many women are like that. So she mocks, she sarcastically saying about this, that every woman adores a fascist. There are many women who adores a fascist, who dominate them. There are many women, instead of getting dominated, they adores that kind of fascist personality. Okay, now coming to next stanza 11. You stand at the blackboard, daddy. In the picture I have of you, a cleft in your chin instead of your foot, but no less a devil for that, no, not any less the black man who. Again, there is a continuation after this stanza. Here she is saying, you stand at the blackboard, means if you remember, I have told you in the first stanza that her father was a professor. Okay, so she's saying, in the picture that I have of you, you stand at the blackboard. You are standing in the front of the blackboard. A cleft in your chin instead of your foot. And there is a cleft in your chin. There is a division in, many people have a division kind of thing. So there is a cleft in the chin and instead of your foot. But no less a devil for that. So though devils have a cleft, devils there are many illustrations where the foot of a devil is seen as a two-clawed foot. Fingers are not there, but a cleft is there. So she is saying, instead of your foot, you have a cleft in your chin, but you are not less than a devil. You are actually a devil, no less than a devil. Alright, she's saying that. And so here, another metaphor she is using for her father, that is devil. She has compared him with Hitler. He has compared, she has used the metaphor black shoe, many other, Hitler and devil. Now she is using the metaphor devil. So many, metaphors she has used. No, not any less the black man. Now she is saying, but no less a devil for that. Even though you don't have a cleft in your foot but in your chin, but you are no less than a devil. No, not any less the black man who. Now there is a continuation. Bit my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried you, and 20 I tried to die and get back to you. I thought even the bones would do. So this is the continuation from the 11th stanza, the last line, and she's saying, any less the black man who. You are not less than a devil, and you are the black man who bit my pretty heart into two. Here the black does not denote the color or the complexion of his father, but the personality which is black. Why? Because he is the devil. And she is saying, any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart into two. You are the man who tore my pretty red heart into two pieces. And she is saying, when I was 10, now here there is a bit of autobiographical element coming in to the poem. And she is saying, I was 10 when they buried you. When I was 10, they buried you because you died at that time. At 20, I tried to die. And at 20, when I was 20 years old, I tried to die, means she tried to commit suicide. So that is the autobiographical element, because actually she tried to do so. And why did she try to do so? And get back to you, because she actually wanted to commit suicide to get back to you, so that she can come back to you. I could come back to you and live, with you after death. I thought even the bones would do. How? At least she's saying, if I'll die, if I would have died by suicide, at least the bones would have touched the bones of your body, because my grave would have been next to you, and that way at least I could have tried to be with you. So these two lines continue the contrast of the father to the speaker. The father is huge, evil and black, while the speaker, like her heart, is pretty red and a victim. And here this line shows how disturbed, the last line about the bones and all shows that how disturbed the speaker is by her relationship with her dead dad. So disturbed that she would try to kill herself so that she could come closer to him. So that's how it is. Now stanza 13. But they pulled me out of the sack and they stuck me together with glue, and then I knew what to do. I made a model of you. I'm a man in black with a Mein Kampf look. Now again, very interesting line. Now she's saying, I tried to commit suicide in the last stanza, she's saying, but in this stanza she's saying, but they pulled me out of the sack. Means, sack means a sack of death maybe. They pulled me out. Those people who rescued her, they pulled her out and they stuck me together with glue, and they replaced me, and they, tried to stuck me back into the life, you can say, with a glue. Anything which is stuck with a glue will never be as same as before it was. So it is never repaired. It is just stuck with a glue. So she is saying they stuck me back together with glue, and then I knew what to do. And then I came to know that what should I do in future, because I tried to commit suicide, but it didn't happen because I could not get you. So what she did, she wanted to prepare a model like that of her father, whom she was missing so much. And what was that? I made a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look. Then she got married. That will come in the next stanza actually, but she made a model of you. So she exactly found a man who was just absolutely like her father, and a man in black with Mein Kampf look. Now Mein Kampf is what? Hitler. Another man. She has called her father also Hitler once in this poem previously, and now she has found another man who is a replica of her father and is in black dress and with a Mein Kampf look. Mein Kampf look is, who has a Mein Kampf look? Mein Kampf means my struggle. That is the name of the autobiography written by Hitler. So Mein Kampf look means the look of the Hitler. So she is saying, I'm a model of you, a man in black with a Mein Kampf look. So she has found a replica of her father, who is a man in black with a Mein Kampf look, Hitler look, right? And here you can very clearly see the Electra complex, which I was talking about in the first video, that when a girl longs for her father and competes for her father, and when she, misses her father, there is a hollowness of that personality in her life. She goes for another personality. She looks for a personality exactly like her father. That is a symptom, that is a, trait of Electra complex. Like in men also, Oedipus complex is there. They want somebody, a girl exactly like her mother. Mother is different, wife is different, but why they want a partner like her mother? That is known as Oedipus complex. Replacing, mother with the similar, figure. And then she's saying, and the love of the rack and the screw. And I said, I do. So daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't warm through. So what she's saying in these lines, read together with the line 58. These lines tell us that speaker tried to die but did not succeed. Okay, that was in the previous stanza, all right. And in the current stanza, she's saying, and a love of the rack and the screw, and I said, I do. So now we know this man modeled after the speaker's father wears black and looked like Hitler doesn't sound very appealing so far. But line 66 makes it even worse. The rack and the screw are both gruesome torture instruments. The man sounds like the epitome of devil, the man whom she is replacing with her father. She has chosen for her father as a replica, okay. So this man sounds like the epitome of evil. He's like Hitler and loves gruesome torture. So what does our speaker do? She marries him, confirming her wedding vows. So and I said, I do. When a girl says I do in church, when she says ki in like Muslims they say kabul hai. Similarly, in church, when a wedding is going on, the father asks whether are you ready for this marriage or you are ready to accept all the vows taken by taken during the marriage. Then she says, I do. So this means she's getting married to her. So she found a replica of her father and she gets married to her. So that is Electra complex. Okay. So set this up earlier when she claimed that every woman loves a fascist in the earlier 40s. The speaker is definitely showing herself in love with the fascist. So she herself is in love with the fascist. Okay. Which previously she said, by marrying the man she modeled after her father. The speaker is fulfilling the Electra complex, which is like the female version of the more well-known Oedipus complex. Basically, the Electra complex is a theory that women seek men who are like their fathers, and the Oedipus complex theorizes that men seek women who are like their mothers. And then she says the most important line of the poem, so daddy, I'm finally through. So I am now through with you. I have been able to get over you, because so far I was stuck with you and your memories, but I got a replica of you, so I am through with you, she's saying. Now that she has this model of her father, she's through with her actual father. She doesn't need him anymore because she got a replacement. Okay. Wait, we think, isn't her father dead? How can you be through with someone who is dead? So how can you be through with someone who is already dead? So she was stuck with him through his memories till now. As we can see in this poem, even though he's physically dead, her father is still very alive in the memories of the speaker, and that was the torture she was suffering from, a complicated relationship. She is through with her memories of him and their effect on her daily life. That's why in the beginning she sees 30 years. Even after the death of her father, till 30 years, she was, she had this complicated relationship with her father and memories. So we have seen her dangerous obsession with her father throughout this whole poem. So we would expect to find her relieved upon declaring that she's through with her father, but she is not relieved enough to end the poem here.
Now we'll come to the 15th stanza. I'll read out the lines. If I have killed one man, I have killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years, if you want to know, daddy, you can lie back now. Now, in these lines, the poet is saying that in the first line, if we'll see that here we are back to the speaker's claim from 6th line, where she has said that she killed her father, but not in real sense, in her mind. We know from that stanza that he died before she actually killed him. But here she is again claiming that she has killed not one man but two, because she's saying that I have killed one man, I have killed two. So we can guess that the first man she claims to have killed is her father. And what about the next man? What about the second man? And then again, she is using the metaphor vampire to explain or to describe her father, because she had a very, as we have discussed throughout the poem, that she had a very perplexed relationship with her father. So the second man she's talking about is somewhat the model of her father. So we'll see who this man is. Okay. But through the first line, we are guessing that she hasn't actually killed these men, but she has killed these men only in her head. Now, what does what the line mean? The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years, if you want to know. Now, through these lines, we get more indication that the second man that the speaker has killed is as suspected the man that she modeled after her father and married. And that man and the father, she has denoted her father as the vampire. So, and previously she has already made it clear that this man, that her father, is like a Hitler to her, and now he's a vampire too. So he is such a vampire that he actually drank her blood, and she starts by saying that he drank her blood for a year, but then she changes her mind and she's saying that she drank her that he has been drinking her blood for 7. So she is not sure. By these lines we'll see that she is not sure. So what personally my perception through these lines is that this man can be her husband, Ted Hughes. So we are not sure why she changed her mind on the time span. Maybe she was not only married to the man for 1 year but knew him for 7 years, or maybe she thought he was only cruel to her for 1 year, but upon further thought she realizes that he's really been cruel for 7, which could be totality of their marriage. So now there is an interesting fact that in real life Sylvia Plath was married to Ted Hughes for about 7 years. So if we will try to understand these lines through this perspective or through this information, then we'll understand that, then we can guess that the second man is the model of her father, that is her husband, Ted Hughes. Now in the last line she's saying, "Daddy, you can lie back now." What does this mean? What does this line mean? Now after the speaker has stressed that she has killed both her father and the man she married, who reminded her of him, she tells her father to lie back. Why? Normally you would think of this as something comforting, like, yes father, you can lie back, like lying back and relaxing. But it's kind of a weird that speaker is telling her father, her dead father, whom she seems to hate or at least be angry at, to lie back and relax. Why? It's also a little strange that she calls him daddy, which is an affectionate name for someone she has aligned with so much evil. But she's saying that you can lie back now, because now finally the poet has come to terms with the fact that he's no more, and now you can lie back easily. Alright, now we'll check the stanza 16. Now we come to the last and the concluding stanza of this poem, that is stanza 16. So here are the lines. "There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They have always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I am through." Now, there's a stake in your fat black heart. Here the poet, as suspected, the speaker isn't telling her father to lie back so that she can relax. So in the previous stanza, we were suspecting that the poet is telling her father to lie back so that he can relax, but it's not like that. She's telling him, or perhaps telling the part of him that is in herself, to lie back because he's dead. That is to take a back seat. Now I don't want to think about you anymore. So she's saying so that he can be finally be out of her memory. But he hasn't died a merely human death, because memories of him, like a vampire, have lived past his physical death, sucking blood from our speaker. He must be killed like a vampire with a stake to the heart. His heart here fits the rest of the descriptions of him, big and black as an evil. It's the opposite of the speaker's heart described in line 56 as pretty and red. And then the next 3 lines, if we'll try to understand the next 3 lines, I'll read out those lines. "And the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They have always knew it was you." So not only is the speaker's father dead, slain like a vampire, but the villagers also never liked him anyway. Alright, so she's saying that he was so cruel that even the villagers never liked him. This seems like a reference to the vampire lore. We are not talking like Twilight here, but older literature like Bram Stoker's Dracula, in which vampires lived near little villages. So the poem shows us that it's a kind of an understatement that the villagers never liked the speaker's father. They are so happy. Actually, they are not just okay. They are very happy that he's dead, and they are brazenly dancing and stomping on his dead body. So we can, through these lines, we can actually understand, and we can, guess that how cruel or disliked her father was. They are doing so because they always knew it was you, she says. Given the vampire references, this probably means that they always suspected that the speaker's father was the vampire, causing all sorts of problems and mysterious disappearances in the village. So it's important to remember, as the metaphor grows wider, that this vampire is really just in the speaker's head. While the villagers could be a metaphor for the real living people who surround the speaker, they are probably not actually villagers, and there's a good chance the villagers are just in speaker's head. And finally she says, "Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through." Now the poem reaches to its crescendo with this line, and if it was a rock concert, there is where the guitars would be smashed. So the speaker has said in that she has through with her father before in the line 68, but the repetition of the word daddy here and the addition of the word bastard makes this condemnation final, because before this the speaker has used the word daddy only 4 times in an 80-line poem. Alright, but using this affectionate term for father twice in the last line makes it sound almost like she's beating on his chest to get her point across that yes, daddy, daddy, you bastard, I am through. So that is a final metaphor and the most disturbing metaphor which she has used. Nobody calls his or her own daddy a bastard. But this shows the complexity of the relationship both of them shared. So the use of the word bastard seems to be what this poem has worked itself up to. So the speaker has tried out every way possible to criticize her father. She has called him a Nazi, the devil, a vampire, but in the end she wanted to get out a good verbal punch calling her father a bastard. So that's all.
Daddy by Sylvia Plath. You do not do any more black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God. Ghastly statue with one grey toe big as a Frisco seal and a head in the freakish Atlantic where it pours bean green over blue. In the waters of beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you. Ach, du. In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars. The name of the town is common. My Polak friend says there are a dozen or two, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ich. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, in the language obscene. An engine, chuffing me off like a Jew. A Jew to Daku, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. The snow of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna, are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestors and my weird luck and my Tarok pack, I may be a bit of a Jew. I have always been scared of you, with your Luftwaffe, your gobbledygoo, and your neat mustache and your Aryan eye, bright blue. Panzerman, oh you. Not God, but a swastika, so black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist. The boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, in the picture I have of you. A cleft in your chin instead of your foot, but no less of a devil for that. No, not any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried you. At 20 I tried to die and get back to you. I thought even the bones would do. But they pulled me out of the sack and they stuck me together with glue. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you. A man in black with a Mein Kampf look and a love of the rack and the screw. And I said, I do. So Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't worm through. If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year. 7 years, if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, you bastard, I'm through.